Hello, everyone. Oh, let's turn. How do I turn that off? How do I turn this off? Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to your daily Johnny Depp Amber Heard update. And just to make ourselves feel sort of like we're sort of vaguely doing something vaguely sort of organized. That's who we're talking about. That's who we're talking about. How are you all? How are you? Have you just come off the live? Have you just been watching? She took the stand, Amber Heard, at about, well, I think at about 3, 4, 5 or 6 o'clock. And I'm already seeing from a number of your comments that the vast majority of you were not impressed by Amber Heard. You weren't convinced. You weren't won over. You weren't impressed. You felt that she was potentially acting. I don't know. I don't know if she was acting or not. It's a tricky one, isn't it? We talked about this last night. It's very hard to kind of come in on a case with such serious allegations and simply say it's not the truth. It is the truth. She's acting or not acting. But suffice it to say, it's been a sensational day, an absolutely sensational day in court. I mean, to hear Amber Heard, it's the first time I've heard Amber Heard actually talk. I don't even remember her talking in Aquaman. I'm sure she did, but maybe with bubbles. So it was intriguing and interesting to get that sense of her, because how much do we make our decisions based on first impressions? Do you know what I mean? And first impressions, the Faith Goodman, I felt her facial expressions and tearing up were like acting for, oh, I've lost your comment, were like a film director said, action or cut. Before we get on to her performance, let's tease this out a little bit for a little bit. The day started with Dawn Hughes, who was Amber Heard's witness, who was there to testify essentially about the fact that Amber Heard was suffering with PTSD caused by Johnny Depp, and she wasn't borderline personality disorder, she wasn't histrionic personality disorder, she was just she was just PTSD woman, and she'd been traumatized, and she was there to talk about IPV and all of the implications of domestic violence and what have you. Today, Johnny Depp's team, I don't know what you thought of this, Johnny Depp's team were cross-examining her. And I have to confess, I thought they were pretty shambolic. What did you think, guys? What did you think? It was very awkward and cringy, Reese, at times. That being said, Johnny's smiling and laughter while she's recounting seemed a bit slimy. No, I agree. Well, we're going to get to that. But what did you think of her, the woman who was giving the initial testimony today, or being cross-examined, was this lady, Miss Hughes. And in essence, Amber Heard's team had brought this woman out to effectively cancel Dr. Curry. And it was incredibly ponderous questioning of this woman by Johnny Depp's counsel. It was pedestrian. It was pedestrian. And I kept feeling, I don't know if you felt, I kept feeling like they were building to some great big revelation. And they were going to they were putting all the they were lining up the ducks. They were kind of getting things in position. They were strategically about to go stunk. And then they just stopped. I mean, their main accusation of this woman here, a sort of forensic psychologist specializing in domestic abuse, their main sort of allegation against her was that the stuff she disagreed with was the stuff that she disregarded. Would you agree? Would you agree? Did you trust her? I hope she doesn't come back. I mean, if you had to, okay, I'm going to do a poll. Sorry, I'm just going to do it. Between Dr. Curry and what was her name, Dr. Hughes, who did you believe more? Who did you believe more? Was it Dr. Curry? That's Depp's psychologist, or Dr. Hughes, the woman pictured alongside me, Amber's? Answer the question. She doesn't like men, Jackie Vallina. Yeah, I mean, a lot was made of the fact that she kept sticking with the pronouns of he and she for victim and perpetrator. I mean, a lot is being made of the fact that you or a lot was made of the fact that she'd never defended a male in a IPV case. Can someone remind me? I can never ever remember what IPV stands for. Is it intimate person? Is it I can't remember what it stands for. Someone remind me what IPV stands for. They were also saying she was biased to believing women and testifying for women. Absolutely. The idea being that she'd only ever testified for a gay man or, a same-sex male victim of IPV. Intimate person violence, isn't it? Intimate person violence. Yeah, the poll is posted. It's there. I can see it. 95% of you so far are saying that Dr. Curry, Depp's psychologist, was more believable and trustworthy than Dr. Hughes. Reese Roberts, a lot of these testimonies from these selected character witnesses speak volume through their body language. The darting of the eyes across when she was taking pauses was quite interesting. Intimate personal violence. Thank you. Curry, lots of you saying Curry. The poll should be at the top of the live chat. She said she wanted $500 for an hour, or for an hour, not $100. I think that's a bit of a red herring. I mean, Johnny Depp's counsel were doing that with Amber Heard's counsel were doing that with all of Johnny Depp's witnesses. How much are you being charged? I mean, that question, how much are you being charged to sit in the witness dock? One of those witnesses should have turned around to the lawyers and said, "You're being paid. You're being paid to defend her." I mean, what a load of old nonsense. I mean, I just thought that. I think it's a ridiculous line of questioning that. So this woman was there, and I have to confess, I think this woman and Dr. Curry and all of the stuff around these two women, I think this woman, Dr. Hughes, essentially, they tried to cancel out Dr. Curry, but they kind of cancel each other out. Don't you agree? I think they did effectively cancel each other out. The prosecution and the defense, they've cancelled out these experts. You could put a piece of paper between them. I think potentially this woman is more sort of qualified potentially, but the other woman seems so much more her demeanor seems so much more professional and sort of amenable. And she seemed sort of more cogent and precise in what she was saying. But I think they cancelled each other out. But I do think that essentially this is all the fluff and background noise. All this stuff is the fluff and background noise, because actually what we're all interested in, folks, aren't we? What are we all interested in is Johnny versus Amber. This whole trial is going to pivot around whether we believe him or we believe her. And so consequently, Amber Heard came onto the stand. It was quite, I don't know why, I found it quite a moment. Did you? There was quite a moment. I thought, Christ, we're about to, in terms of Hollywood history, all these kind of, strange things that happened in the public eye. I think it was quite a moment. It was like Jack and Ori, Karen W. So not surprisingly, they led us into Amber's backstory through her childhood. We got a sense of, interesting that we've heard that her parents were opiate addicts. Her father was an abuser, that she was a caretaker child. And then we had painted this bucolic sort of childhood of horse ranches and saddling horses and being sort of tomboy with her dad, and her dad being this big burly kind of self-made man. So I felt there was some narrative. They were trying to shift the narrative a little bit there, so that perhaps her childhood wasn't quite as traumatic, so that her PTSD, there couldn't be an accusation that her PTSD was an overhang from her childhood. They really wanted to keep this pivoting and focused on Johnny Depp. Do you think? I thought it was almost too. They kind of streamlined. They sort of prettified, I thought, her childhood. Who knows? Her father described her as the son he never had. She was taught not to show fear and not to be intimidated. And you can see these clever little lines delivered there. I'm not sitting here saying she's talking bullshit. I am going to express my opinion at the end on what I thought of her delivery and the way in which she shared her story and the way in which she talked and the way in which she engaged with the jury. She was very much talking to an audience, because she would always turn to the jury, wasn't she? But Johnny would do that too, so that's fair enough. So, these were some of the sort of narrative lines. I think it's really helpful to view her testimony as if it's the narrative or the structure of a Hollywood movie. And this is the setting the scene, isn't it? This is the setting the scene. Um, she even said that when she was younger, when she first kind of found herself doing a few jobs in Austin, Texas, she then found herself in California. In Austin, Texas. She would be doing all sorts of things, bit parts, little roles here, little roles there. But did you notice she said, "I even did a bit of makeup"? And I wonder if Johnny's counsel might have picked up on that. So she did a bit of makeup, because there's a lot of discussion about makeup, isn't there? Has she used makeup? Does she wear makeup? All that kind of stuff. So she used to do makeup from a young age. Um, Pretty classic sort of rags to riches story. She came from a working class background. She was trying to move up, get bigger parts, all that kind of stuff. The greasy pole of ambition and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, she got cast on the Rum Diary. And I think the first googly that I think Amber's counsel and her story and her testimony were wanting to kind of put out there. What did you think of this? Was they they really exploited the fact that she was half his age when she met him. He invited her up. Everything about the description of how they met, how she was cast, how she kind of got to know him, I felt was a grooming story. Did anyone else think that? Gonna ask as a poll. Do you think that aspect, the way she met, talking about the age difference? I mean, when they met, he was 44 and she was 22. So what? They're both grown adults. You can't adjust your judgment based on that. Was Amber's description of meeting Johnny inferring grooming? Yes or no? I felt very much they were portraying, this older man. He's a famous actor. He's got power. He's got influence. He's got charm. He's a producer on the film. He invites her up to his room. They talk about poetry, grooming, 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 all this kind of stuff. But one question I made a note of here, as she herself said, she said he was one of the most famous people in the world. One of the most famous people in the world. So, you're not one of the most famous people in the world. And, you know, when they are the most famous person in the world, you know that they've got a lot of power and they've got a lot of influence. But she was really ramming that home. And I just want to find this quote that she used. I don't know if this is the right quote. She says, "I knew how famous he was, and I was a no-name actor, and he's twice my age, and here we are getting along about obscure books and blues. I thought it was remarkable. I thought it was unusual and remarkable." So, and then I thought quite quickly, well, if you've genuinely gone through all the horror and all the abuse and everything that has gone wrong that they're going to talk about in the rest of the trial. Sorry, I'm trying to get my hair out of my eyes. Would you have talked as fondly as she did about it? What did you think of that? I was struck by how convincingly she took herself back to that halcyon time, that sort of idyllic moment. Now, that's not to say that's not what she was feeling at the time, but given everything that's come to pass, and given that her opening words were, "This is the London trial was one of the worst moments of my life, and this is now the next worst moment of my life." Um, would she have been able to access in the way that she seemed to? She was almost sing-songy about how their romance started. Didn't you think that? I mean, again, I'm not inferring anything from it, but if I saw that as a juror, I'd be thinking, okay, well, this is very preconsidered. This is very preconceived. If you're genuinely traumatized and your PTSD, as this woman, Miss Hughes, has said, is a consequence of everything that's gone on with Johnny, you're now sitting probably the closest to him. Let's not forget this. She's now sitting the closest to him that she's probably sat. It was since the London trial. I wouldn't have thought that it would be. I'd have thought she would have struggled or would have been troubled in the retelling of how of what a whirlwind romance they had. I thought she got some real kind of, low punches in there at the beginning. She talked about the fact that, did he use his tongue? I mean, the woman asked, did he use his tongue when he kissed her? She said he did. Yeah, we got mega pints of tea. Did you notice she tried to drop the clangor of how much tea he drank later on? And at this point, I was noticing absolutely that Johnny hasn't even looked at her. He hasn't even looked at her. Now, what do you think him not looking at her means or meant? What did you read into that? A lot of people I noticed in one of the feeds I was watching said, guilty, guilty. He can't bear to look at his victim. And then lots of other people were saying he couldn't look at his abuser. What do you think, guys? Faith Goodman, before she got in the stand, she was studying sheets of paper like a script. He can't bear to, I think, says Laurel Nichols. Jackie Villino, she was trying to make him sound like a sexual abuser from the start. Yeah, I think they're really ratcheting up the sexual abuse aspect, aren't they? She's vile. She discredits us who have been through domestic violence. I think I've said it before. I said, the problem with this case, and it's a huge problem, is we're never going to know. We're never going to know. And to that extent, if Amber Heard is essentially fictionalizing nearly all of this and making most of this up and skewing it in a certain way, we'll never know for sure. But if she is, she will have to sit in that reality, though some people can make these things up and be an absolute fantasist. So, there's this dangerous thing where she might have made it all up, but she totally believes it. Nikki Burton, you think it's because he can't bear her. Creatorholic, hi there. He can't stand her, Katie Thompson. Haffy B, did you notice that she changed so quickly, later saying she was hiding a relationship, inferring it was bad? He hates her so much. The Gems 19, his shame. Yeah, I mean, I think even if you're on Depp's side, there's so much in this case, even if he hasn't done what she was saying, that there's shame around all of this, really, isn't there? She talked about how they loved red wine. And she talked about how in the trailer, he flicked his foot at the back of her bathrobe, flicking her bathrobe up. Now, again, and he said, yum. Now, that might have happened. And I was left thinking, again, me and Nadia recorded a How to Stay Married today about those aspects of any relationship that, if put under a microscope, could be seen in a negative light. If you look at almost the microscopic DNA of what makes up parts of a relationship, not the whole relationship, there's an argument to say that some of those things that we partake in could be seen in a more suspicious way. If you think about the way most people get together in relationships, most people get together often, like with me and Nads, when you're really drunk, or you're being a bit stupid, or you're being irresponsible, or someone makes, there's that phrase, isn't there? Someone makes a move. Described in this context, in a court of law, where there's talk about violence and sexual abuse and what have you. Yeah, an addict is an addict, the Gems 19, but an addict isn't necessarily a domestic abuser. That's just the point I'm trying to make. And I think it's very important that we don't just throw everything at him because his life is totally wayward and it's totally screwed up and he's all over the place. So do you know what I mean? So yes, the way this was being suggested, I felt they were suggesting it was predatory. Everything about him was predatory right at the beginning. Did anyone else feel that? Did you feel she was trying to sort of change the narrative? So on the one hand, it was a whirlwind romance that was making her feel brilliant. And then on the other, so I'm just moving things off so I don't scrape the microphone. And then on the other, it was predatory. Lee Durrant, just because he's an addict doesn't make him an abuser. Oh my God, Millie Clark. We'll get to the word cavity in a minute because I thought it was a curious choice of words. She talked about being on the press tour for the Rum Diaries, and again she sort of tells another story, which, given the fact that #MeToo has come up, we know all of the stories of Harvey Weinstein and how he invited women up to his hotel room under false pretenses and what have you. I felt there was very much the echo of #MeToo being pumped out when she talked about Johnny Depp inviting her up to join him and the director of the Rum Diary in their hotel room. And when she got up there, the director wasn't there. So it was kind of like a bit of a honey trap. He talked about the fact that he'd separated from the mother of his kids. They talked about books, they talked about poetry. Again, reminding us she's half his age. She's 22. Again, you look at this. So I was at times trying to say to myself, if Amber was my daughter, I'd be wanting to smash Johnny Depp in the face as a 44-year-old man, just because I'm a father. Do you know what I mean? So you can see, the fact that she's going towards these suggestions or inferences doesn't mean that they didn't happen. But if they didn't happen, it's really sort of reprehensible if she's making it up. Someone's just asking, how would she pass the insurance medical for Aquaman if she was so unwell, according to the Hughes questionnaire? Very good question. You should be in there, Faith, asking that question. So she talked a lot about chemistry. He grabbed her face and kissed him back. Yeah, the woman said, did he use his tongue? He used his tongue on the film set, and then he used his tongue again when they were kissing. We fell in love, said Amber. It was a whirlwind romance. Again, what comes with whirlwind romances is often sort of speed and chaos and irrationality and impulsivity and compulsive behavior and all that. She talked about feeling $1 million. She talked about feeling very intense. Meanwhile, Johnny Depp was sat opposite her, saying and feeling it appeared nothing, just jotting down and drawing and playing with his gummy bears. It felt like magic. It felt like a dream, she said. There she is. She was in the dock, and then we quite quickly got to how. Did you notice how everything that the psychologist said, her psychologist said, like, so love bombing was this sort of overwhelming of someone with tokens and artifacts and gifts or attention, and then sudden withdrawal. She talked about the way in which he was incredibly generous. He would buy her whatever she wanted. He even bought her father things that he wanted. She thought that he was so sort of, he would overwhelm her. But now, in terms of the characteristics of a domestic abuser, it's called the charm syndrome. And there's a book, there's a studies done about the charm syndrome, how domestic abusers will charm everyone, lull everyone into a false sense of security, win everyone on board, and then engage in their abuse. It's sort of, it's part of the narrative, it's part of the profile. And what I struggled with at times was I was beginning to feel quite early on in Amber's testimony that she was concurring to the profile that the various experts they put on the stand had described, or certainly her psychologist had described. Uli Bloom, in regards to the grooming, she'd been with the woman for 4 years before she met Depp. That woman was 32 when they got together, Heard 18. That sounds more like grooming to me, to be honest. Look, and also the other fact of the matter is, I said the other day, my heart went out to her. If she has had a traumatic childhood, she did come from a very difficult home, though they try to kind of sugarcoat it today. My heart goes out to her. These are two damaged people. There's no, I don't think anyone should be engaging in, she's evil, she's this, she's that. She's whether you would believe her or not is something completely different. And if you don't believe her, then it's quite natural that after that you're going to follow through to thinking, how can she do this? But we have to always pause and take the stance that we don't know for sure. Curious moment where she described how being with him, he was drinking a lot of tea. What did you think? What was that about? I think she said it because she thought she was going to get a bit of a laugh from the audience, from the courtroom. But what was she going on about with the tea? Was she trying to infer there was something else in the tea? I think she maybe was trying to say there was alcohol in the tea. Drinking a lot of tea, because of course later down the way he was hiding his alcohol in the coffee away from his children. She believes her story, says Karanula, but I don't. Fair dues. Just end that poll. 70%. I think it was, they were trying to get us to believe in grooming. Then we get, and what I also found about her testimony was, I was surprised. Was anyone else? I was surprised. Kirsty Bookbinder, I please you said that. I was surprised by how obviously she intercepted the key things that have been talked about before and didn't go off script. What I mean by that is, imagine, so when they grilled Johnny, they sort of say like a necklace, they identified 10 narrative beads on that necklace, yeah? That event, Barbados, Australia, Australia again, the flats in downtown flats in California, Barbados. So you've got, I can't remember them all, but you've got all these events. And as she sat there, she only targeted those events and never so far has not really gone off that script to give us yet more embellishment, more color. Because I thought, I don't know if anyone else did, I thought she would be, they would be, and maybe they will be tomorrow, we don't know, but I thought they'd be kind of reaching for yet more evidence of stuff that's gone on. I'm going to show something. There's a photo that comes up in a minute. I think they had a particular fracas. Was it in Barbados, perhaps? So yes, so there was much talk about how Johnny Depp was incredibly generous. He was incredibly generous to her parents. He loves knives, so she bought him a romantic gift. She took of the knife. Let me show you the knife. Have you seen the knife? The knife is quite a spectacular knife. It says "till death" or something like that. Till we die. Just try and find it. I think it's. Let's find that knife. It's quite a blade. Until death, I think it says in Spanish. She said he loves knives, and this was a sort of darkly romantic gift. I mean, a lot has been made of, would you buy a man who was beating you up or hurting you a knife that says "until death"? She said it was more about romance and what have you. And she would talk a lot about, did you notice again, concurring with Dawn Hughes, that he would disappear for great periods of time? He may well have disappeared for large periods of time, but he might have been disappearing also to control his addictions or to get a grip on his addictions or what have you. Now, going back to the comment that I can't remember who said it about, an addict, the problem with this is most addicts are chaotic. Most addicts, I can say this from experience, most addicts don't know fully everything that's gone on or done or that they've done. That works two ways. On the one hand, it means that some things like this could have happened. But if he was that chaotic, I still don't understand why there's no hard evidence, footage, or audio tape of it actually happening, nor first-hand testimony of anyone else seeing it. If he was that chaotic on drugs and alcohol, it would have bled out from the private sphere, the idea that it was just happening behind closed doors. But at the same time, addicts are easily taken advantage of if the person who's sober spies an opportunity to exploit the situation. And I wondered whether there was a moment that perhaps she was young and in a chaotic relationship and out of her depth. Perhaps she was out of her depth. Perhaps she was struggling. Perhaps she was young. Perhaps this was too much. Perhaps she was enamored with the idea that this is the most famous man in the world. But could there have been a tipping point, of which this is part, what do you think, guys, where she thought, hang on a minute, I can take advantage of this situation because he's so off his head and he so can't remember what the hell's going on that I could say and do anything. And yet, if that was the case, where is the hard or harder evidence? Because at the moment, it's still hearsay. That famous word that Amber Heard's team constantly scream out, hearsay. What do you think, guys? Avril McClure, did Johnny not wear rings back then? Yes, she did describe a back slap with his ringed finger, and apparently it left blood on the wall. There was a little case, wasn't there? There was one story where she talked about the fact that there was an artwork, I think it was made by an ex-partner of hers, and one night in a heavy drinking, cocaine-taking, fueled sort of madness night, Johnny was padding around and he started to sort of, this painting personified the person she'd been with, and so it became a sort of a totem for his jealousy. This is what she said. And I thought this was a curious story, this. She said so the headline was, he tried to set fire to it, which sounds really dramatic, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound dramatic? He tried to set fire to it with a Bic lighter and it didn't take. Even if it was burnt a little bit, why is there not photographic evidence of that when in the same room, and I think it was the same event, the photograph of all the drug paraphernalia was taken? I think what I would do if I was Johnny's counsel, I'd start to sort of home in on what things didn't have photos taken of them when the photos that she did take of things were taken, if you know what I mean. Why no photos of the marks from his rings on her face? Why no photos of the blood that supposedly hit the wall? Curious. Where was this? Was they had a premiere? She talked a lot about his commentary about what she was wearing at premieres. I noticed on Twitter that lots of people were posting photographs of her and him out at premieres with her wearing really revealing tops. That doesn't mean that he didn't have a funny, controlling, jealous aspect to him if she was wearing revealing clothes and was going out. At what point, and this is an important question, and this is kind of one of the things we talk about in How to Stay Married. At what point is jealousy domestic abuse? At what point is him passing comment on what she wears domestic abuse? Because I think it's really important that these things are becoming conflated in quite a complex fashion. And so she said that he would say things like, "That's really what you're wearing? Did you see that?" And she was claiming that she wanted him to see her. She wanted him to recognize that she was on the red carpet, that she was doing things, and she felt embarrassed. Um, and she said that on one occasion at a premiere, he blew up. He'd smash things up. He'd be apologetic. There was one time, she said, where she commented on the wine tattoo, the Winona Ryder tattoo, and he slapped her 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And that was her first moment of extreme emotion, really, where she looked particularly distressed, I thought. And I wanted to ask you guys, what did you think of her distress when she was distressed on the in the dock? I think that was kind of what was going on at the time. Is it just me, or does it look like Johnny is doing a colouring in book while she harps on? Yeah, there were a couple of times, Reese, I think you mentioned it, where he's got to be careful. He's got to be really careful. He's got the gallows humor sort of approach to life, where if he hears something ridiculous, he'll chuckle. But that doesn't look good in a 50-something man chuckling about anything if a woman is sat in the dock, crying, whether you think it's hyperbole, overacting, badly acting, whatever, lying. The fact of the matter is there's a woman in front of you. I think, I think for saying the amount of trauma she said she's received from this guy, I think she's sat quite comfortably opposite him in a way. She talked about how he slapped her 3 times over the Winona Ryder. And that was pretty dramatic. And then I think it was from that that he hit her in the face, and she submitted a photograph. This photograph. Let me just show you this photograph. What I thought was curious about this photograph is that they admitted this as evidence when she described. This was after a scuffle that she described. There you go. He had hit her repeatedly in the face. I think this was the 3 slaps in the face. The question I wanted to ask was, if she'd been hit in the face so much, why wasn't she showing that? Why hadn't she photographed that image? This is the image that she sent to her mother. And I'm not for a minute sort of denying, I don't even know how I got that. I mean, I literally don't know how I got that. Nadia has bruises like that sometimes on her arm. I mean, they engaged in, to use the phrase, rough sex. Again, if he had hit her in the face, like she said he had, why are there no photos? Why not take a photo of that? That's not to say there haven't been other photos at other times. I'm just going to show you a couple of them. These are the sort of much publicized ones, where I think there's the suggestion that perhaps makeup was used. Let's see, there's a slight scratch there under her eye. Catherine Hamilton, I hope Mr. Chew is the one who's going to chew over this. I thought the guy who was doing Miss Hughes today was a rambling idiot, but I think Miss Chew. Now, this whole case comes down to who do you believe. It's not about if you don't. But I think the important thing to say is this: if you don't believe Amber Heard, it doesn't mean you don't support victims of domestic abuse or IPV. It doesn't mean that at all. If you support Johnny Depp, it doesn't mean that you're a misogynistic incel who wants, you know, all victims of domestic abuse to be sort of queried and questioned. Not at all. This is an exceptional case. I think it's an exceptional case. It's not a sort of standard representative case, and I think it's about believability. That's not to say that, and I've said it all along, that there's a lot of misogyny percolating around the treatment, description, and attitude towards Amber Heard, which has got, you know, it's got sort of muddied with this idea that maybe she is a manipulative, lying, opportunistic, delusional fantasist. But even if she's all those things, we shouldn't hate on her because she's a woman. Let's just take them as two individuals. And, you know, one of the other big question marks is, would, you know, one of the things that keeps coming up is, would Johnny turn to this kind of behavior at the age of 50 if no one else has claimed any of this behavior before? Not one tear shed shows how she as an actress is beyond me, not convincing at all. Yes, someone else just mentioned a moment ago, she would really dive into the high emotion and then she'd pull herself out quite quickly. She'd go back into the emotion very, very. Now, I presume and I assume that the jury will be mindful of that when they come to their judgment. She did. I thought there was a bit of a contradiction here as well. She talked about, you know, getting to grips with addiction and the behavior of an addict, and yet at the same time, I thought she grew up in a home where people were addicted to opiates. So it wouldn't be that new. And drug taking, I don't think she was as naive around drug taking as she liked to say she was. Story of the painting, I said, the lighter, the artwork, all that kind of stuff, that didn't kind of stack up. And then they went to Hicksville. It was the Hicksville story, wasn't it? Where she was sat around the fire. A friend of hers took MDMA, got a bit cuddly with her. I guess that's what MDMA does. She'd had a mushroom cap. Johnny got jealous, threatened to break the woman's wrist like he did the air hostess, went into the trailer, smashed up the trailer, and then proceeded to do a cavity check. Now, I know that cavity check is what it's called. She claims it's what Johnny Depp said he was going to do. But as I saw someone say on the live earlier, would someone who had gone through this, what sounds terribly traumatic, I don't necessarily know if that person would say he did a cavity check on me. I don't necessarily think she would be able to describe it as perfectly as she could. I'd have thought it would be far too raw and difficult. Do you know what I mean? Susan Cooper, may I just say it's all a load of bullshit? You certainly can. Yeah, so he ripped her underwear off and he did a cavity search. Would she have used that term if that had happened? Would she not? The problem, in a sense, her weak spot is the fact that she is an actress, because we could all just kind of say, well, she was acting. Who thinks she was acting? Should we do I'm going to do a little poll just to see. Was Amber acting throughout? Community. And then there was kind of before the close of play, why no A&E reports, absolutely. Before the close of play, we had a couple of other stories. Let me show you this image. See if you know what part of the story I'm about to talk to with this. Oh, little teacup Yorkie. She shared a story about Johnny howling like a dog. I think this was when he was off to film with Keith Richards. Howling like a dog. And he held his dog out the window. So she's managed to slip in. So she's managed to get in there grooming. She's managed to get in there sort of predatory behavior. She's managed to get in there animal abuse. It's quite something, isn't it? And then she managed to, she got in there sort of charm offensive, love bombing. She's ticked every single box that Miss Hughes was talking about earlier. And you can see why, in a sense, that Johnny Depp's lawyers didn't do it very well when they were challenging Miss Hughes, the psychologist, about this. You know, they were trying to say, but wasn't she just saying all the things that need to tick the boxes? And I think she was. Look, there's the dog. This is Amber when she was either leaving or arriving in Australia. Now, people have made much of her looking out of her head here, but I tell you what, when paparazzi get shots, they actively try and get shots of everyone getting out of cars looking like shit. Brandon X, we believe in generation, and I'm sure if anything that she said happened, it would be more generic, like she was drinking, he was drinking, they do drugs. Very good point, Brandon. It was almost so specific. Details were so remembered. And I'm not saying this, I saw a number of other people saying who themselves have said on various social media platforms saying, as a victim of domestic violence, I don't remember the specifics in this detail. Now, I suppose the caveat there is that because it's all been brought to court twice, she's had to remember the details. But there is something about the sort of the fact that she can remember them sort of so in such sort of repetitive detail with all the kind of aspects absolutely in sharp focus. And as I said before, isn't it interesting that she didn't leave any of the key dramatic moments we've heard all along? She hasn't created or constructed a new one. She'll say something nebulous like, oh, there were 3 or 4 other occasions, but this one occasion. That's important. So we had animal abuse, cruelty to animals that has been thrown in there. And then just to round the cherry on the cake before they wrapped up, and just to give you a heads up, do subscribe to the channel. Do subscribe if you haven't. We do all sorts of stuff here. Showbiz news, movie reviews, cookery, vlogs, mental health films, gardening even, you name it, we do it. There's always something for someone here, but do subscribe if you haven't. There should be a little button below. To add, and also to know that there's going to be 10 after tomorrow. We've got a full day tomorrow. Then there's 10 days of no trial because the judge has a conference that she has to go to for 10 days. So it won't be coming back until, I personally think she's still going to be on the stand when we break. And then there's going to be 10 days of massive speculation. She then, just to kind of leave us with this image as we went to bed, said how he would lose control of his bowels, pass out in his own sick, that his team would have to change his pants. And at this point, Johnny was laughing to himself. The tragic truth of something like that, oh, look at that. Hi, Mark. I think the US Senate recently passed a bill that allows animal abuse of a partner's pet to be regarded as domestic violence. Wow. Okay. So could that be another box ticked? Or, to be fair, could it be yet another box ticked in a terrible way? Johnny was like, now, the terrible fact of the matter is, for an addict who's taken and drunk as much as he has, I'm pretty certain he may well have dropped a few things down his front. He may well have maybe wet himself, or I know people who've wet themselves and pooed themselves and they weren't even drunk. And when you've taken as much as he has, I'm sure some of these accidents have happened. And that must be quite humiliating for him. And I've made a note here towards the end of the day, and this is the big question for me. Could there have been a moment in all of this sorry saga, this is what I've written, where she was at one point an innocent bystander who'd got in too deep, but began to discover that possibly the most famous man in the world that she happened to be with was so out of control, she could potentially turn this to her advantage. That was me coming from a position of no agenda. I just thought things aren't always just one thing. Johnny Johnny is an addict. There will have been all the chaos of all of that. He will have lost his temper at times. He will have been irrational and irresponsible and unreliable and what have you. She was too. She admitted it. Even her psychologist this morning said yes. She partook. She said she partook in right at the end of her testimony. She said. Yes, Johnny Depp did have physical and psychological acts perpetrated against him by Amber Heard. So, let's just say they were just in a chaotic relationship from an early point. And then at some point, there was just a tipping point where she thought, fucking hell, I'm in control. I'm strangely more in control of this situation than this sad, struggling addict. What do you think? That was that's the sense of it that I'm getting as I came out of it today. And then towards the end, right towards the very end, we had, I thought, as a father, I thought this was a really traumatic moment, really. And I thought, I don't know why, everything about this aspect of this story, I don't know what you thought before we sort of sum up. I thought a lot of this rang very true to me. When they're in the Bahamas, they're on a yacht that he's selling to J.K. Rowling because he needs to get to sort out some money. His daughter Lily Rose is panicking because actually he's drinking alcohol. He's slipping it into coffee cups. He's becoming more uncontrolled. I drank like that. I remember hiding alcohol in Diet Coke and stuff like that. And Lily Rose suspected that he was falling off the wagon. And Amber Heard said she'd befriended or fallen in love with his family. It's a very tricky position to be a stepmother or a stepmother figure when you're as young as she was too. It must be very tricky. And Johnny Depp accused Amber Heard of telling his children. And she says that he said he could kill her. That has all the aspects about it of a very real, tragic addict parent struggling with their addiction around their children and their partner. For me, that all rang true. You know, and I think there are so many, there are so many moments like that I can't work out the extent to which she's exploiting those moments and bending the truth, because actually there was the DNA of what she's saying in what was going on, if you know what I mean. So there you go, guys. I think it was a fascinating day. And of course, all we're hearing is Amber's side. We've heard Johnny's side. Johnny's was much slower. We're getting a lot more information from Amber, lots more notes. I just think fundamentally, if I was a juror, I'd be looking at, I if I'm really honest, I thought her performance was a performance. Even if what she was saying was true, and even if some of the things she was describing were real, she overperformed it. She'd overthought about it. She overconsidered it. And it was just overperformed. And I think in a weird way, if what she's saying is true, any of it, she did herself a disservice, because she, as someone said, she tried to cry and couldn't cry. If we're allowed to say that we find Oscar speeches cringy, then I guess we're allowed to say we find testimonies cringy. And I found her testimony a little bit cringy, if I'm honest. There you go. That's where I'm at. Anyway, I'd really like you to leave all your comments below. This is going to roll and roll. It's going to be a long day tomorrow. I'm going to have to, it might be a bit later tomorrow, because I'm going to have to watch most of her testimony a bit later in the day. So it might be more like 11 o'clock that I start, or 11:15. Thank you, Amos Savi. As I say, do subscribe, do follow us. Whenever things like this happen, we're always trying to be flexible to react to stuff and do things like this. And we love your contributions too. So keep them coming. Guys, go to bed, unless you're in a part of the world where it's not bedtime, obviously. Bye.